Steve and Patty, thank you for allowing us into your house today. I know we came in with all this equipment and moved all the furniture around and just kind of made a mess of the place. So thanks for tolerating us and all this stuff we brought with us. Steve, I know you've got like over 300 patents. I know you've done a number of TED Talks, a couple of TED Talks, one in Hong Kong to over a crowd of over 2,000 people. I know you did a TED Talk with the founder of Burning Man at Burning Man. Amazing. I know you've got 7 films under your belt.
That's the fact that we're looking at the universe in a completely different way. It's bound to teach us something.
Without passion, you've got nothing in life.
I know you moved from industry to industry, always seeing things that other people didn't, and then creating things in a way that the people from the industry didn't do. It's remarkable. Always coming up with something that's new and interesting and different, and seeing that space differently than the people that are already in it, and sometimes even creating something that didn't exist at all before. I think that's fantastic. And the one that we're going to focus most on is Sneakertopia, where you entered this space that you knew little or nothing about, and then created this object that now has an entity to itself. It's the center point for a lot of the people who are involved in it, and is now traveling the world. And there's a bit of a backstory before actually, the actual event starts, or before the actual place starts getting built. You had just made a move from Woodside, with a couple blocks from me, to here in Malibu, right? And I think you sold your house there, you moved here, there was a rental, and I think things went bad. What happened?
Well, there was a massive fire that I was just in time for.
This timing.
Actually, Patty and I were at the Napa Valley Film Festival in the theater in a documentary called Biggest Little Farm. And the story in that film, which was set not that far from here, a big part of the story was a giant fire coming in and kind of wiping out everything that they'd been working on. And then we walked out the door, and there was a lot of smoke in the air. It was up in Northern California because there were fires going on up there. And because all the firefighters from here were up in Northern California fighting the fires up there, there's a fire in Malibu that just kind of swept all the way through till it burned itself out in the ocean. Like nobody was here to stop it. And our fire was like our home was right in the middle of it. So we were for a little while all we had was our carry-on, and we kind of realized, well, we're not homeless, we're traveling. We're still traveling. So I ended up, we went to Europe. Patty visited her family in Europe, and I visited, I went to several countries in Europe and visited Syrians that I got to know, Syrian refugees I'd got to know on another film that was about Syrian refugees, and everybody's like bringing me in and saying, oh, Steve, I can't, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I can't even imagine. And I'm like, of all the people I can't even imagine, you guys all had your homes destroyed. Like, this is nothing. I still have my friends and my family and my community. It's like, we didn't really lose anything. But it was a little bit of a bonding experience, because there's just a little tiny inkling of additional connection of just experiencing a sense of loss. Because the loss is not, all the stuff. The loss is sort of every little bit of evidence that you ever existed.
Right.
all the photos, all the papers, all of the, stories, everything that was physical that ever existed in our life was gone. So it's sort of like, for our kids too, it's like any physical evidence that you actually had a life before was gone. So all you had was what was in your head.
Yeah.
And that aspect of it, certainly anyone who has to leave their home as a refugee has that, 1,000 times, a million times over what we experienced. But we're all sort of descended from somebody in your family tree, and a bunch of people in my family tree, and certainly my wife's family tree a lot closer, her parents, were uprooted that way and had to reinvent themselves. Mm-hmm. And so it was very much a story about that. There's no physical evidence of their entire prior life, although it's just what's in their heads, and there you have to start a totally new life. Well, we already were starting a new life in Southern California, so we were already in that journey. But this was kind of like the universe stepping up and saying, you asked for a clean slate. Okay, well, here's a really clean slate.
Right. So Steve, you're back from Europe. You've lost your house. It's like, I don't know, like how does one just kind of pick themselves up again and say, like, what do we do next? If you're like, how did Sneakertopia come into being? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
One of the films where I was helping the person achieve his vision, Pras Michel, this kind of OG in the hip hop world, the co-founder of the Fugees, with Wycliffe Jean and Lauryn Hill, he did this just extraordinary documentary about hip hop and politics collide in Haiti after the earthquake. And it's just a thriller of a documentary. And they were struggling to figure out how to get this out. And I'm like, hey, I probably can help. So I ended up getting involved in helping this film get out and also, get booked in theaters and go through the Oscar qualifications and even get Praz's original song, into the kind of into the not the final finalists, but into one of the kind of short list level for original song. And I just got to know a whole new kind of creative world, and it was just super fun and super interesting. And I started working with Steve Harris, who's a television producer his whole life. We're looking for things to collaborate on. Like when you're doing television, you have like a million things in development, and only some of them end up making it all the way through to happening. So we had a lot of projects in development, and I sat down with him and I said, okay, like if you just had to pick one, which one would you do? And the one that he picked was the sneaker one, because sneakers have sort of become like this expression of Black culture in America, from sports and then music and then design and art and fashion, and it had been extraordinarily successful. Not just Michael Jordan, but then with Kanye is like he's known for music and a bunch of other things, but what he's really known for is completely being this new generation of changing the whole game again in the sneaker business. And now you've got people like Pharrell and like extraordinary artists doing the same kind of thing.
I think that like we're in this lifetime to express ourselves. No one can tell you who you are, where you are, why you are, or when you are. Like that's all determined by you.
Everybody who is an extraordinary creative spirit in Black culture in America and was extraordinarily successful in sports and music and art and fashion and design ended up somehow being involved in sneakers.
And you...
So for me, it was uncharted territory, which is really Black culture in America really being kind of the quintessential American popular culture. Kind of, and this extraordinary kind of like wellspring of creativity and passion and entrepreneurial talent, and something that I was completely had no idea about, and I had just really no connection to. This is something that could have been a film. Actually, is going to be a film, but at the time, we were looking at like, is there a totally different format for this? Can we make this a museum? Can we essentially find a way to tell the story that might have been in the film? Can we tell it on the walls of a museum through art and artifacts and tell the story that way? So that's what Sneakertopia was. It was like taking something that was sort of a film concept, a film story arc of this really 100-year journey going from this sort of elite, British tennis kind of elite kind of thing, because people discovered how to, tap rubber trees in the Belgian Congo with, nearly slave labor, and to enable this elite thing called sneakers to becoming this, just completely dominated by, the street, and becoming like the kind of the pinnacle of like streetwear, and being kind of this expression of just a cultural expression in the U.S. that really kind of started with Black culture, and became like skate culture and like a lot of different cultures of sort of like coming from the street. Like that's been like this iconic feature of it. And we created this place that was a celebration of that and told the story of that. The retail that you go to, it's like, hey, you know what? I don't want this just to show up on my door. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I want to try it on. It's not just entertainment. It's an experience. You're going there for an experience. So we sort of had like what was an amazing retail experience, but with the store as an afterthought. We had a gift shop, like every museum has a gift shop. But it was like, well, why don't we just sell the experiential side of it and not worry about the product side of it? But then it was starting the company, actually moving forward with it. I'm like, I was very immersed in the story of the Syrian refugees who were just all starting new lives and new businesses and new everything, and didn't have anything, didn't have any connections, didn't have anything except just their friends and family. But I was like, okay, I'm here in this new city, don't really know very many people. Now we've upgraded from the dive motel to a Airbnb. The tiny little Airbnb in Topanga in a really rainy winter. And I'm in the Topanga Public Library. I'm like, well, could I do that? Could I, I've started a lot of things, but now I have this whole network of people, and I have, Silicon Valley, I know lots of venture capitalists, I know a lot of people, and a lot of places to start, but could I start something from scratch in a field I actually don't know much about, full of people I don't even know, and could I do it? So part of it was like this sort of little challenge to myself, being there kind of at a point in a new city with nothing. Can I on a for a kind of nominal fee on my credit card, start a company, raise money from new people, put together, build a team, put this together, and do all this, and it was sort of an exercise in that. Yeah. And we did do that. Steve Harris and I co-founded it, and I'd actually already sort of like set it up. I'm already doing it. I'm already rolling. It's like, we can. I think we can get this thing financed. Then we put it together. We split up the equity. Steve's the CEO. I was like, you're the CEO. I'm the president. We're basically we're running it together. We wrote a business plan. We kind of envisioned this whole thing out. I started doing some of the growth hacking test marketing. What's the audience? What's the scope of the audience? And how's this going to work? Started to recruit people and raise money, and raised a seed round, and found a place that we could do this without paying a lot of rent, because it was again a dead mall, an empty Nordstrom's rack that had nothing better going on. Unfortunately, no foot traffic either. But we were able to put all this together and make this thing happen and open it up. Initially, it was just art. There was no sneakers. But the art was all kind of LA, a lot of street artists in LA who were interested in sneakers, and had some, were sort of, they're passionate about it in one way or another. And they were each was commissioned to do sort of a different part of the story, to go from, kind of the origins to sports to music to entertainment and streetwear and the arts.
The piece I designed for Sneakertopia is a multi-directional illusion sculpture. From one side is the Jumpman, and then from the other side is the Jordan 1.
So I have a whole bunch of musicians, and they're all wearing their kicks, It's really cool to merge all that music, those decades of hip-hop music together for this event.
My installation is Sneakertopia. Basically, I have 3 walls. I had to envision in maybe 100 years from now what I think Back to the Future 4 movie would look like, and like how people would dress, the cars, how sneakers would be involved in the future.
We're going in the future space route, which I love too, because I love Elon Musk, and I thought his spacesuit was like the perfect thing to paint about.
The whole scope of Sneakertopia and what I see as the story and where my place is in this story, for me it's just all the things that a 15 or 14-year-old kid would want to become, and this is the zone where he figures out how he might get there.
This is like the art capital of the world. There's more artists in LA than any other place in the world. And so there's a lot of talent around here. So we just started scouting and meeting people and letting people pitch us as well. Like, here's what we can do. And we did put together a team, and we did find a way to get to know artists, and we had some people helping curate that and introduce people, and that kind of expanded. The only thing that we didn't have any sneakers.
Right.
But by that time, we already had some people that were involved who were, kind of more and more connected in the sneaker world. And Steve Harris, his son, is a total sneakerhead, and through some of this sort of networking in that world, we ended up coming across more people who had bigger collections of sneakers, not just Steve Harris's son's collection, which is the starting point. And we ended up finding a guy who had a massive collection, who was who had a whole business in like acquiring sneakers and flipping sneakers, and we let him put all of his stuff there kind of on consignment. It's like, hey, you put them in there, we're going to have these racks to show off all these sneakers, and it will match it to the storyline. So we ended up having a really interesting collection. In fact, a collection that's so interesting that Live Nation is just now, this next week, renting our collection to go put on display at the Rolling Loud Festival as, like a Sneakertopia little mini exhibit. And it's going on, and the whole museum is going on tour in Asia, and Singapore and Korea and a bunch of other places.
So I've seen some of the footage of, some of these interviews, and of course you're a film guy, so you get a film crew. I've seen, some people have 10,000 pairs of sneakers. They're like super dedicated to this.
I got all these sneakers. I own 1,000 pairs of sneakers.
It's their passion, their life. In some of those interviews, it almost seems like they don't even really understand why they're so delighted and interested in this, right? Like, it seems like in some of those interviews, you're kind of pulling out of people, trying to help them understand, again, as a filmmaker always does, like, what is it about this that's such a driver, right? Like,
I met a lot of people that could not articulate why they were so passionate about it, and it was interesting. I mean, it was interesting to me that, there's this deep cultural significance related to it, and there's just also this kind of extraordinary success it's representing this kind of extraordinary creative and kind of achievement and success that's come out of sports and music and the arts. And it's sort of an embodiment of that. It's an icon that represents that. And it's also like a very successful business for a lot of people. Not just, this whole idea that, it used to be this commodity. I mean, Nike would try to make, I want to pump out billions of the same thing, and sell them for $30. Well, now they're all kind of, because of revolution in manufacturing, you can do lots and lots of small runs of things, so they can be much more individualized, which means they can be more scarce, which means that if people discover something or say, hey, that's cool, but it's also sold out. So what happened is the value went way, way up because of scarcity and kind of the cultural significance and people from sort of sneaker culture and popular culture and music and superstars in music and sports kind of saying, hey, this represents me and this is cool and this is interesting, and then other people would desire that too. And so what happened is the whole business model of sneakers changed, and it went from being this sort of mass marketed thing to this massive cottage industry of all of these individual things.
My name is Steve Harris. I own a sneaker museum, Sneakertopia. You don't have to have a $1 million sneaker collection to be able to follow the market and actually own a piece of it. I personally like investing in sneakers because I love sneakers. I love the way they look. I grew up collecting sneakers. Almost anybody could be part of the culture.
And for me, that's what made it interesting. I mean, more than the sneaker itself, the sneaker is just an expression of something bigger, which is why it's going to end up as a film at some point as well.
Yeah.
Because it's full of fascinating, artistic, creative, and entrepreneurial stories, and it's just it's a whole, for me, completely uncharted territory, and realizing that this is just wonderful, creative, entrepreneurial culture that I had no connection to, and now I've like deeply connected to, and I love it.
I know. I can't imagine like the good fortune to have you as a business partner, because it'd be like, we need a business plan. Of course, you're like, oh, I've done lots of those. I can do that. We need to go raise money. Well, I know everybody there. That's fine. That'll be easy. We need content. We need a film creator. I was like, well, I've made a bunch of films, so that's fine.
But when you get into the industry, it's like, oh, you have all these documentaries. That's great. Well, but they're all one-offs. It's like one and done. I was looking for something more persistent. The museum idea is something that's more persistent. It's something that's potentially could have an endlessly long life. I mean, it has its challenges because it's challenging to do anything retail or experiential in a pandemic, and all the rules have kind of changed on that. So, we still have a lot to figure out. But this idea that people, going out of their houses, going out into the world to experience something, that's your world of retail. Sneakertopia is like, well, how do we infuse storytelling into that world, because it should be part of the same thing.
Yes.
It's an example of that. And I think probably every mall owner in this country is trying to figure out how do we make this an attraction.
Yes.
Because it needs to be an attraction. Otherwise, why is anyone going to go?
Yeah, exactly.
I started looking at how do we make it an augmented reality experience where we add many more layers to the story. And I ended up developing an AR app that's in the App Store right now, called Sneakertopia. And within that app, it's kind of it's detecting where you're at in the museum and what you're looking at. And there's 200 different things in the museum that are activated, telling the backstory behind the story. So all of these people involved, and it's like 200 people on the walls in Sneakertopia. But when you hold the iPad up to it, and hopefully someday when you put on the glasses, it comes to life and they tell their story.
Yeah, I've played around with that. It's marvelous. And if you walk in, you can use your own device with the app, or they'll hand you a device, which is really nice, whatever you choose. And then, first off, it's such a rich, amazing place with so many interesting exhibits. But then there's, as you say, this layer on top of that where you can aim this at just about any point, any spot in the room, and have interesting things happen on the wall, and stars happen, and background patterns happen. And it's through the iPad, it's such a different experience on top of being a really remarkable space.
The first iteration of it was very incomplete, but when we reopened it with the augmented reality and with a lot more sneakers, now it was like people would stay there for 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that generation of retail come around now, where it's really entertainment and education and enjoyment first, and stuff second, which is. Tell me a little bit about the numbers. So when did Sneakertopia first open?
Founded the company in January 2019. Opened it in late October 2019.
Yeah, but then I was on the list, I got invited. It was invite only. It was, velvet rope, and it was like a big deal to be invited. Mm-hmm. You had to get a referral from another friend. And of course, again, as a business partner, you got to use all of this understanding of how to use social media, how to subdivide this entire group of people, how to reach them, how to stay connected to them. Again, like just another benefit of having Steve as a business partner. And then tell me a little bit about, once it got going, how many people have gone through it? How many people have been through the whole experience? Do you track that?
So the museum, and what you experience is sort of the event side of it. So there's sort of two aspects of this. One is as a place to bring people together for an event.
Yes.
And we had a whole bunch of those things, and they were packed. We even had a few events where all kinds of people that were customizing sneakers or flipping sneakers and had brought their collections in, and we had a line around the block of people coming in to go buy and sell sneakers in the context of this museum.
Yeah, and they were packed.
They were packed.
Yeah, amazing.
the Cardi B offset party, it was jam-packed.
What was the crazy thing for the Cardi B event? Wasn't there money falling from the ceiling? I forget, there was a story about that.
So it's just part of the entertainment in the successful hip hop world to have a party that's full of a lot of scantily clad dancers, and to have a money gun where you're shooting money all over the place and no one dares touch it, because it's no one's going to lower themselves to pick up any of that money, so you're just going to dance on top of it. So it's just part of the experience. It's just part of the entertainment, and it was hilarious. It was great. It was hilarious. So I brought Patty and two of my kids who were in town. First they're like, I couldn't get them to go to Sneakertopia because that's one of Dad's things. It couldn't be that cool. But then I heard them bragging about it to their friends, and their friends are all like, how did you get invited to that thing? And it was like, oh, my dad. So, I got to be cool for a day at least.
That's cool. So a lot of people have gone through the museum now. You've hosted all kinds of amazing events. Again, now you've created this thing that didn't exist before. You're pulling together all these groups of people that like didn't have that much overlap. So what's going to happen to it now?
Well, now it's like a traveling exhibition. So, it's closed in LA. We lost the space. We don't have the access to the space anymore. And the next it's going to open it looks like the next one's going to open in Singapore. Dubai, it's going to hopefully go to New York too, and Miami at some point.
That's amazing. I love that, again, I keep getting stuck on this, but it's something that didn't exist before. It wasn't your industry. You kind of noticed this with another person. You created this thing. Now it has this sort of life in perpetuity that it's now roaming around the globe. Like I just find that so amazing, like so wonderful. And then of course, sneakers and the artwork you can box up and travel, and the AR stuff works anywhere, right? So it's actually like if it was a sculpture garden or something, it would be a little harder, but it's actually a pretty good candidate to move around the globe. Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. Okay, so it's such a great retail story. I love the fact you used distressed retail. You did something and saw something that no one else did. You created this epicenter. It's now like got wings and it's running around the globe. I think that's great. And
it's a way to activate distressed retail. So
it is.
And I think the opportunity for it will be as something that can come to a retail location that needs some new energy.
Yeah.
So it's not like a franchise store or something like that. It's something that comes in, it's an event, and it packs up and goes to the next place.
I love that it iterates and changes and learns and adapts, right? You can have that same sense, that same feeling, that same experience in a 3,000 square foot space instead of a 25,000 square foot space, sure, and take it to people instead of people coming to it. I just can't get over the fact that like this entity has been created and is like continuing to propagate. It's great. It's really good. So what's next for Steve?
I'm very interested in communities and things that bring people together in an entrepreneurial way, things that inspire people to do more than they thought they could do. And I am exploring different avenues for that. I mean, the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who makes things happen for themselves, taking charge of your own destiny and making something happen. And all of my films are about people that are, because there's no, that's what a story is. A story is somebody with some kind of desire, some kind of a dream who actually takes action on it. If you just sit there and you don't act on it, there's no story. So acting on your dream, acting on your vision, acting on your desire, usually leads to some trouble and some challenges. And that's what a story is made of. But that's what every entrepreneurial journey is, that same kind of journey. So every one of my films is that, whether it's in science or in nature or in kind of urban farming, or the artist at Burning Man. It's that kind of a story, because that's my story. One of my first filmmaker friends said something to me to the effect that every filmmaker only makes one film their whole life. Every film they make is sort of another version of that, because you have to be in it. It needs to be, in the end, there's something about you that's in that story. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Otherwise, that's what comes out. You come out of it. And I don't have a final answer.
Yet. So maybe we'll get to do this again with a whole nother industry. Right. I imagine it'll be something brand new, something everybody else should be able to see, but only you see, and will be amazing. Steve, thank you for inviting us into your beautiful house and letting you and Patty let us take over your house with all the stuff and these people for a morning of conversations with you. I'm just so thankful that I got to sit down with you, and it's just such an amazing story. You're such an inspiring guy that continues to move from sector to sector, see things that no one else sees, change things, and then have those things propagate and keep going. And it was a great morning to spend with you. Thank you.
Thank you.